beautiful hair, or being able to sing like a cherub, or being a whiz at computers. Thomas looked at her again. "Mum doesn't have any fairy cakes," he said. The fairy shrugged her wings. "Oh, come on," she said. "Concentrate. It's not every day that you get a wish granted." "I wish that—" "No good," the fairy interrupted. "You can't wish for your father to be fun. It has to do with you, Thomas," she said gently. "After all, today is your 9th birthday." Thomas looked surprised. "How did you know I was going to wish for that?" he said. "Oh, quick!" said the fat fairy, as Mum's footsteps could be heard coming up the stairs. Thomas said the first thing that came into his head. "I wish I could fly." Why he said that, he couldn't think. "Nice one," said the fat fairy, standing up just as Mum entered the room with 2 cups of tea and a plate of fairy cakes. "I'm all done and dusted, dear," said the fat fairy, giving a loud belch. All this wishing plays havoc with my insides," she went on, gulping down the tea and putting 3 fairy cakes in her handbag. "Well, I can't stay here all day, enjoying myself." And without so much as a goodbye, she made her way down the stairs. Mum followed, saying, "Wait a minute, I was wondering which company sent you." But by the time she made it to the front door, the fat fairy had vanished. Thomas went back to school the following Monday. Monday was his worst day. There were games, and Thomas hated games. "Could I have a note saying that I've been ill?" he asked his mum. "No," said his dad firmly. "If you're well enough to go back to school, young man, you're well enough to play games." So Thomas stood in the hell zone that was gym. Miss Peach took no nonsense from her class. She had all the apparatus out in the school hall, the beam, the trampoline, the mats, the dreaded jumping horse. All the class lined up ready to jump over the horse. It usually went with a good rhythm, that is, until it came to Thomas's turn. Today would be no different, he thought miserably. Thomas closed his eyes and started his run, waiting for the bump as he hit the horse, the shout that would be Miss Peach telling him he wasn't trying hard enough, and the laughter that would be his classmates. Except he didn't hit the horse, and all he heard was a loud gasp. When he opened his eyes, he was amazed to find he was about 6 feet off the ground. Thomas landed ungracefully on the other side of the horse. "Thomas Top, what do you think you're doing?" said a shocked Miss Peach. "Nothing, miss," said Thomas. "Just jumping." The class was silent. Children can jump high, but 6 feet off the ground was unbelievable by anyone's standards. Miss Peach was seeing things, that was it. She clapped her hands. "Now, everyone, settle down and let's do it one more time. Well done, Thomas, for getting over the horse." It happened again. This time Thomas found himself about 8 feet off the ground and heading for the other side of the school hall. He landed with a loud bump. "That's it, Thomas Top. I will not have this kind of showing off in my lesson," said Miss Peach. "You will go and sit outside until you calm down." Thomas sat outside in the draughty corridor in his plimsolls and a flimsy white T-shirt and brown shorts.
"What are you doing out here, Thomas Top?" said Mr. March, the headmaster.
"I got sent out for showing off," said Thomas apologetically.
Mr. March laughed. "Not like you, Top. You're always such a quiet little chap. Oh, come on, let's see what all this is about."
The class were now on the trampoline.
Sorry to interrupt you, Miss Peach, but this little fellow tells me he's been sent outside for showing off. Is that right?"
"Yes," said Miss Peach flatly. "He was jumping too high."
Mr. March looked puzzled. "Jumping too high? Well, I never would have thought that he had it in him."
"Neither would I," said Miss Peach, who didn't appreciate the headmaster's interruption one little bit.
"Well," said Mr. March, "I'm sure Thomas will behave himself now, and perhaps he can join in on the trampoline."
Thomas had always hated the trampoline. He was no good at coordination. Jumping up and down terrified the socks off him. He climbed up gingerly, his face pale. "Don't forget to bend your knees," said Miss Peach sternly. Thomas bent his knees and straightened up again, feeling very wobbly on his feet. "He's not really trying, miss," said Susie Morris. "He didn't jump," said Joe Corey. "He just bent his knees."
"Now come on," said Mr. March. "I'm sure you can do better than that. Let's see you jumping nice and high."
And what happened next gave Thomas the biggest shock of his life. He found himself going up and up towards the ceiling of the school hall, his legs and arms waving about, before grabbing hold of a beam and hanging there. Thomas was scared of heights. They made him feel sick. He was now higher than he'd ever been in his life, and he didn't know how it had happened. "Help! Please!" cried Thomas.
"Get a ladder, quick!" cried Mr. March. "Hold on, boy, we'll get you down."
But it was too late. Thomas felt his fingers getting weak. There was no way he was going to survive this. He was going to fall, break both his legs, his arms, his collarbone, everything. Of that he was certain. He let out a small scream, which seemed to be echoed by a much louder one from everybody down below. He was falling like a stone. Thomas put out his arms to break his fall, and this had the effect of making him go up again. This couldn't be happening. He felt he was on a roller coaster. Oh, perhaps it was all a bad dream. He would wake up in a minute and find himself safely back in bed with a nice, safe, sore throat. Instead, he found himself sitting on a beam high up in the school hall, looking down on his class and teacher, who were all staring up at him, open-mouthed. He clung on for dear life, while Mr. March quickly ushered all the children out of the school hall. "That's all fine and good," said Miss Peach to herself, "but the question is, how are we going to get him down?" Mrs. Topp arrived at the school in a terrible state. What kind of incident? Why have I been called here?" she said. Mr. March looked embarrassed. Thomas felt miserable. It had taken over an hour to get him down. In the end, Miss Peach had to climb up, and with a lot of gentle talking, which didn't come easy to her, she had managed to persuade a very shaky Thomas to make his way to the floor.
"Well," said Mr. March, clearing his throat, "Thomas jumped."
"Well, isn't he supposed to jump? Isn't that what they do in gym, jump?" said Mrs. Topp.
"Yes," said Mr. March. "Not quite this kind of jumping, though."
"I'm sorry, you've lost me," said Mrs. Topp, looking even more baffled. The headmaster coughed.
"Please, sit down."
Mrs. Topp perched on the edge of her chair, while the headmaster told her what had happened in the school hall. He had to admit that it sounded rather far-fetched. When Mrs. Topp had heard what the headmaster had to say, she stood up. "You've brought me all the way to school because Thomas jumped," she said. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're talking about, Mr. March."
"Thomas," said Mr. March, "will you please jump?"
Thomas looked at his mum. "Do I have to?" he asked her. "Yes, let's get this over with," said Mum wearily. "Then I can get back to work." Thomas bent his knees and pretended to jump, keeping his feet fixed on the floor. "There," said Mrs. Topp. "There's nothing wrong with that. He's never been all that good at sports."
"Thomas," said the headmaster firmly, "I would like you to do a proper jump, not a pretend one."
Thomas looked from his mum's face to Mr. March and knew there was no way out. He closed his eyes and jumped. He hit his head so hard on the ceiling that a bit of plaster fell onto the carpet below. Thomas landed with a thud as Mrs. Topp fainted. She recovered to find the school nurse holding her hand and Mr. March pouring a cup of sweet tea. Mrs. Topp felt flustered by all the attention and stood up, feeling weak. "I think you should sit down until you get over the shock," said the nurse kindly. "There is nothing to get over," said Mum, getting up and adjusting her coat. "We are just ordinary people, and jumping very high doesn't run in the family."
"Quite so, Mrs. Topp," said the headmaster. "All the same, perhaps Thomas should spend a few more days at home until he's quite better."
There was no way Mrs. Topp would be going back to work today. She took Thomas's hand, and they left the school and walked home.